Hi, everybody. Today's Monday, September 15th, 2025, and our friend Larry Johnson is back to his headquarters in Florida. Well,
Yeah. Yeah, well, but like I said to Judge Napolitano, I have to thank you for accommodating my schedule, except you're my adopted son, so you got to put up with it, okay?
yeah, sure.
But nice shirt.
Larry, let's start with. I want to start. I want to talk about the case of the Middle East, the situation with Israel. But before
Mhm.
going there, Larry, here is what Kash Patel said about the assassination of Charlie Kirk.
Did he write a written note before the assassination attempt? That's what the governor said yesterday. And what did that say? If you could.
So what
share
I'm
that
able
with
to
us?
say, I'm sorry. So what I'm able to say is I addressed it partially earlier. Is that the written note we believe what did exist, and we have evidence to show what was in that note, which is, and I'm going to summarize, basically saying the suspect wrote a note saying I have the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk, and I'm going to take it. That note was written before the shooting. Evidence of its existence, we now have learned, existed before the shooting, was in the location in the suspect and partner's home. But we have since learned that the note, even though it has been destroyed, we have found forensic evidence of the note, and we have confirmed what that note says because of our aggressive interview posture at the FBI.
The guy is so amazing explaining what has happened. It's just yeah.
Yeah, no, look, um, uh, while you and I are talking, uh, Max Blumenthal is talking to Judge Napolitano, and he's got some breaking news with respect to the whole the Zionist angle on this. My own hypothesis, what I think that they will uncover, is that Mossad officers used a cutout to convince these transgender activists, to inspire them, to help them, to encourage them to kill Charlie Kirk. So that, to try to distance Israel from it, but to still same time take him out, because Kirk was starting to represent a threat to the Zionists. They had funded him. And, there's no denying that until recently, that Charlie was seen as fully on board and supportive of everything that Israel was doing with respect to the Palestinians. But, those who continue to judge him harshly, and judge him in a way that's very harsh, and to express such vile hatred towards him. I really have a problem. I'm not some Charlie Cook fanboy. I really, I didn't follow him much. But what I did follow is this. I never saw him yelling at somebody, person of color, whoever. I never saw him using ad hominem, calling them names. I did see him correctly calling out people like Van Jones, because, when that poor Ukrainian girl was stabbed to death in North Carolina, the guy that stabbed her said, "I got me a white girl." And Charlie commented on that. He says, if that had been reversed, if you had a white guy walking around saying, "Got me a black girl," that would have created a firestorm in the media. Absolutely. That's what he said. And Van Jones attacked Charlie as being a racist for saying that. The problem I see with the anger that was directed at Kirk was just off the charts. He was, they compare him with the Nazis. The people that say that, they're just stupid. They haven't read history. They don't know the history of what it was with the brown shirts and the communists fighting in the streets of Berlin and München and Stuttgart and other places in Germany back in the 1929, 1930, 32. So, to lump Charlie Kirk in with those kinds of people, where his basic shtick was, hey, tell me that I'm wrong, and would engage in dialogue and back and forth. Now, and people say, well, that's hate speech. Well, good God. Again, anybody that takes that position, I think you're a moron. So, yeah, I'm doing what Charlie Kirk wouldn't do. He wouldn't call you names. I'm calling you names. Because if you take that kind of position, you're so completely divorced from reality. So, this was, I think they're going to find out that this was not just Tyler Robinson, I think that's his name, who got all upset because of the things that Charlie said about he believed in God and that God created male and female, not he, they, it, male and female. And that's why I wanted to kill him. But there is at least the reports that are coming out, if true, indicate that there was a broader communication on these transgender black sites talking about that this was going to happen. A lot of people knew it was going to happen. It was being coordinated. It was encouraged. It was planned. So, this is really creating it. This division has existed in the United States. I just personally didn't realize it was this deep and this disturbed.
I think looking at the Trump administration, those people, even J.D. Vance was talking about this is a fight between left and right and radical left. There is something beyond that happening.
Yeah, I agree with you.
They want to to wrap it up in something else to sell it to everybody, because we know this division between left and right and how they try to fight each other. They're trying to hide something behind it. And looking at, I don't know if you saw the interview that Charlie had with Ben Shapiro 48 hours before.
Yeah, I've seen a portion of it.
Yeah. He asks Ben Shapiro, why are we allowed to criticize everything in the United States, but the position on Israel? Why we cannot criticize Israel? Ben Shapiro, he changed his face. What is he talking about?
Yeah.
No,
but that's true. It is one of those things that to try to raise it as a discussion, you get accused of being an anti-Semite. You saw that Brian Mast, this congressman from Florida, who got his legs blown off because he's a very bad bomb tech in the Army. He's careless. He is proposing legislation to strip American citizens of their citizenship if they criticize Israel. Hey, you want to do that? You who fought for Israel, you go to Israel. Go there. See if you can get some more parts of your body blown off if that's your thing. But don't drag us into it. We're Americans. And this concept of America first is that Trump has pushed. Yeah, that resonates. Just like in Russia first, not some other country. China first. Brazil first. Mexico. If everybody under that approach thought of themselves first, did what was in their own best interest to improve the welfare of their people, I guarantee you the world would be a lot better off. Instead of we're going to do what's in the best interest of this other country over here, even though it screws our own people. Look at what's happened with Germany. In order to screw Russia, they allowed the United States to blow up the Nord Stream pipeline, therefore savaging German industry. And the German people are suffering. Instead of the German chancellor saying, no, you're not going to destroy the pipeline. And if we choose to have an economic relationship with Russia that you don't like, too damn bad. Leave us alone then. And close all your friggin' military bases in our country. That's what Germany could have said, but they didn't. So, a lot of these problems we see right now that are with threatening to turn into hot wars or already are hot wars are because countries put their own people and their own interests second and third, and they pursue the interests of some foreign power to the detriment of their people.
I think what you've said is something psychological, Larry. it goes to the basics. If you love yourself, then you're capable of loving other people as well.
Right.
And somehow the nationalism, it's going to that concept. If you love your country, you're able to understand that other people would love their country as well. That's why you may find a common ground to work with the other people instead of otherizing people, instead of making, and they're different from us. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
different because they're Brazilians, you're American. But after all, you're human beings. You can come, you can work together, you can find a common ground to work on. But before loving yourself and your country, I think you're not capable of giving love or loving any other nation, any other people.
Well, it's the same. Have you ever known a person that actually hated themselves, and because of that hatred of themselves, engaged in all sorts of self-destructive behavior, whether it's alcoholism, excessive smoking, drug abuse, bankruptcy, not saving money, not doing it, not taking care of themselves, not brushing their teeth, getting rotten teeth. Those are not happy people. Those are not people that are doing well in life. So the same principle sort of apply, would argue, and I think you agree, applies to countries. So that when you actually put yourself first, it sounds selfish, but then when you get in dealing with another country that's putting themselves first, then that's where the art of diplomacy comes in. You find out what can we agree on, what can we do together that will make us each better off. Because it's not, the world is not built to be just a zero-sum game that I win and you got to lose. That's what we're facing right now with this this attempt to accommodate the interests of certain other countries. And unfortunately, Israel has wielded way too much influence in the United States, and it needs to be curtailed. People who are my age, above the age of 60, grew up in an environment in the United States in which the mythology of Israel presented as little David fighting this mean Goliath, and that it was, we had to support it at any cost, any price, to save them from the nasty Arabs, without any attempt at all to tell the actual story that had taken place of the Nakba and the murder of hundreds of thousands of Arabs and the incarceration and imprisonment of tens of thousands of Arabs and Muslims and Christians. To try to portray that this is just a Muslim versus Christian or Jewish thing. No, it's not. No, the Palestinians are not just one monolith under Islam. The Israelis have done an effective job over the last 50 years of driving the Christians out. Christian Palestinians have had an option, but the Muslim Palestinians have not. And so that's why there's now more Muslims in the area. But this constant promotion of murder of the Palestinian people is something now that's starting to create a real problem for Israel. Finally,
Larry, how did you find the summit, the Islamic Arab summit in Doha? A lot of countries went to this summit, and they're trying to give a message to Israel, to Netanyahu, and I would assume they want to say something to the United States as well.
Well, if what they said at that conference was turned into action, it was a miracle. I've actually, I said tongue in cheek with the judge, but that this was actually a secret plan by Donald Trump, another part of his secret plan to win the Nobel Peace Prize, because he gets to go say, look, I brought Syria and Iran together, along with the Saudis and all the other Arab countries and the Jordanians. So, they came together because of me. Yeah, they did, but I don't think you appreciate what they were saying. The fact that al-Jalani, now al-Shara, a radical Islamist, Sunni Islamist, who have spent 15 years minimum attacking and killing Shia and Iranians. They were in the same meeting talking together and agreeing about what was done to Qatar was wrong. Now, al-Shara is playing a bit of a dangerous game because he was put into power by the United States and by Britain. But, I think he also is smart enough to recognize you can't trust those people. They're not going to have you back. They'll throw you over in a heartbeat. Then on top of that, you had Abdullah of Jordan, King Abdullah. He made some very tough remarks, as did Al Thani, the head of the prime minister, the lead sultan in Qatar. Same thing from the Emiratis. Same thing from even Azerbaijan was there, of all things. So this brought together the Arab, Muslim, Shia, Sunni world. I don't think we've seen anything like it, actually. I think that this has been I'd want to ask Alistair Crook. He's much better at remembering these kinds of dates. But this kind of gathering and the tough statement, they didn't have problems coming up with a statement. It was tough, directed at Israel. And then here you got Bibi Netanyahu saying, they're all just a bunch of anti-Semites. No, you're a murderous son of a bitch is what you are. And they're calling you out.
Now, it was, Larry, I think it was so unique to see all these countries together coming to Doha. Because Doha is somehow, it's a tricky place. You see the conflict with Saudi Arabia. You see they were in the Middle East, they were talking about these people are somehow supporting Hamas and they're trying to do, but after all, they were trying to mediate. They were trying to make a deal between Israel and
well, they got suckered in. Look, they got suckered in. They were doing this on their own. They were asked by the United States and even by Israel to do it.
Yeah.
And then they got betrayed because then they suddenly discovered these Americans don't mean what they say. And they'll throw you over. And it's like, I want to sit back and say, you guys are just now figuring this out? I mean, go ask Saddam Hussein. Oh, wait, take a shovel. You can't. You got to dig him up. He's dead. Because Saddam was in the pocket of the CIA at one point. Thought he had a good relationship with the United States. I mean, hell, he was there shaking hands with Don Rumsfeld. And the Reagan administration was supplying with chemical weapons to kill Iranians. How better? Ask Muammar Gaddafi. Gaddafi said, hey, Muammar, we got a deal for you. You give up all your chemical, biological weapons and anything else you're doing on the nuclear side. Give that to us. Let us destroy it. And you'll be our friend. We'll have you over for dinner. We'll invite you out for the holidays. You'll be our buddy. Gaddafi stupidly took the deal. And a few years later, he was dead. He was getting anally raped with a sword to kill him. Same thing for Manuel Noriega. I mean, he's not Arab, he's not Muslim, but the same sort of betrayal. And hell, even to a lesser extent, what happened to Bashar al-Assad. Because al-Assad in the early days of 9/11 actually tried to cooperate with the United States to help rein in the radicals because they were a threat to him too. So, now the Saudis and the Emiratis and they're now starting, and the Jordanians now start saying, God, mate, can we really trust the United States? I would say no, no, and hell no. Don't trust the United States. Act in your own interest. That goes back to what we talked about. Jordan first, Qatar first, Saudi Arabia first, Emiratis first. But they've always played this game of, oh yeah, we'll do what the U.S. wants because it promises us some nice trinkets, some money, some nice weapons. And you know what you call people that basically engage in that kind of conduct for money? They're called prostitutes.
I think they're perceiving, after all, it's so difficult to make peace with Israel. And here is what we had Marco Rubio going to Israel and talking with Netanyahu. And here is what Netanyahu said.
The Hamas, that the raid failed. Didn't fail because it had one central message. And we considered it before we launched it. And that is, you can hide, you can run, but we'll get you. You can, and this is important. I mean, terrorists they think they enjoy immunity, they'll do it again and again and again. And if you deny them that immunity, they'll think twice.
What he's saying that we're going to do this again and again and again.
Of course.
And before coming up, as I talk to you, they're bombing Damascus as we talk.
Yeah.
Israelis.
Yeah. No, I mean, they're the Israelis are serial murderers. They are. You know, if you would have asked me 3 years ago, could you ever envision me saying that I don't think Israel should exist as a country anymore? I would have said, what are you, racist? What are you, anti-Semitic? I no longer believe that Israel deserves to even be considered as a member of the United Nations. It ought to be expelled. It's a terrorist state. It's guilty of killing, you know, they always want to blame, oh, look at all the dead Israelis from what Hamas has done. And we've talked about this before. According to the Israeli Foreign Ministry, ignoring the 1,200 that were killed, 1,219 that were killed on October 7th, which a large number of them were military, so it's not terrorism. Prior, from August of 2000 through April of 2024, the total death toll of Israelis killed by Palestinians, not just Hamas, but the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, Palestine Islamic Jihad. They got like 16 other groups. It was 1,527, I believe. That's over 25 years. Israel, in the course of now these last 2 years, has killed at the minimum 65,000, and the number may be well up over 250,000 civilians, not combatants. That is terrorism. Israel is a terrorist state.
Yeah. Larry, Axios reported that Israeli officials, they told Axios that Prime Minister Netanyahu talked to President Trump well before the strike on Qatar.
Mm-hmm.
And that there were plenty of time for Trump to object or disagree with what Israel did.
Yeah.
He has decided not to interfere.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
Okay. What was the promise, in your opinion? What was the outcome? What could have been the outcome in the mind of the Trump administration or Donald Trump himself that he let it happen?
When they're told that, hey, we're going to do this just like we've done before, like we killed Nasrallah, man, it's going to be a game changer. We kill all these negotiators. They're going to have to come around. They'll have to they'll have to accept your deal. So you'll have the peace that you've been wanting. That's what they promised him. They promised him that he'd get the deal and he'd get the credit. Whoops. That didn't turn out so well. So when it failed, Trump immediately distanced himself. And notice that in the subsequent meeting of the UN Security Council to condemn Israel's actions in Qatar, the United States backed the resolution. So, Trump's attitude, hey, you made a promise, you didn't fulfill that promise, screw you, I'm going to go the opposite direction. Now, I would be interested what message Marco Rubio was carrying, if it was Hey, Bibi, I'm here. I want to kiss your ass. Or, hey, this is, we're not gonna keep doing this, Bibi. You got to change. You got to, make a deal. Who knows? We'll see.
It seems that they did it because of the summit in Doha. That's why, because they wanted to show the support for Israel to somehow.
Yeah, may have been. But what it highlights is it's the U.S. and Israel against most of the rest of the world. Because you're guaranteed the BRICS countries, there are a number of BRICS members in that meeting, at least Pezeshkian for Iran, but the BRICS countries are going to line up with what that group came out and said. It's a very, it's a powerful organization. This was significant. And, sending Marco Rubio to meet with Benjamin Netanyahu as a counter to that is just a joke.
Larry, when it comes to Ukraine, everybody knows that they're receiving everything from the West. But it seems Netanyahu has some sort of rhetoric that is somehow delusional, that he feels that they're producing everything, they're capable of continuing the conflict without the United States. Here is what Netanyahu said, and what's your take on this? Here is
another meeting, and they said, "Oh, Israel is isolated. Israel can't break out of the siege." And I said, "We will." Some of them have stopped weapon component shipments. Can we get out of this? Yes, we can. We're pretty good at producing weapons. Like intelligence, we share both with the United States. A good chunk of your intel. And our weapon systems, we share with the United States. We're tremendously appreciative of the bipartisan support and military.
What kind of weapons are they sharing with the United States? I don't understand.
No idea. I have no idea what he's talking about. They fly U.S. jets, not Israeli jets. They rely upon basically their Iron Dome is a Patriot missile battery, essentially, supplemented by the THAAD, which they begged for because their own missile system sucked, couldn't do it. Nobody in the U.S. military is carrying an Israeli rifle. You get or pistol. So I don't know what the hell he's talking about. They're not using Israeli tank, Merkava tanks. They're not using Israeli artillery. He's delusional. I guess he went to the Keith Kellogg School of Military Analysis, where you get to just make shit up and say it, and then just because you say it, then believe that it's true.
It's not just about the weapons. Here is what he said about cell phones.
Did you have cell phones? You have cell phones here? No? You're holding a piece of Israel right there. You know that? I mean, a lot of the cell phones, the medicines, the foods.
Yeah. They're producing everything. Everything we're using is Israeli, is coming from Israel.
Yeah, what he's guaranteed now going forward, more people in the world are going to use Huawei phones, and they're not going to be buying Apple, and they're not going to be buying Samsung. Buy Chinese, get away from the Israeli influence. So it's, him pretending that so we're isolated. So what? All right, we'll see. Israel's isolation one of these days, it's going to kill it.
It's not going to get better for Israel, Larry,
No.
because as you've mentioned, these countries are coming together. It's something new. It's something big. We cannot downplay what's going on in the Middle East, Larry. You've mentioned Iran and Syria coming together to Doha. It's huge. You put Saudi Arabia, looking at Saudi Arabia and Iran, that rapprochement between the two countries, it's getting better every day and each moment in this conflict in Gaza.
Yeah. And then, again, the most surprising one was to see Al-Shara and Pezeshkian Pezeshkian at the summit together talking. Remember Pezeshkian, we're kicking the Iranians out, and there's all this. They're now going to be united against Israel. Israel's bringing them all together. Maybe Netanyahu deserves the Nobel Peace Prize instead of Trump by bringing together all the Arab, Muslim, Shia, Sunni countries to have one position with respect to Israel.
There's some rumors in the Middle East, Larry. They're talking about something like NATO in the Middle East to defend a defensive force against Israel. I think if the things go in that direction, they're going to have a huge force to defend themselves after all. Because all these countries, I assume Turkey is part of that if they do that. I don't know if we are so optimistic about it, but if Israel continues with this behavior, there is no other solution to that but making some sort of defensive force.
Well, this would fit into Erdogan's, I guess, presumptions of grandeur, where he would get to be the man, because the Turkish army is the largest army in that region and probably the best trained. So you could use that as a core for developing this, and this regional military alliance where Iraq and Iran and Iran would be a competitor to the Turkish military, and Iran's got far superior missile force than Turkey. But yeah, it's something that could happen, but that's not going to happen quick. So it's not going to make any immediate difference. But that's something that could come into play down, years from now, a few years from now. But I think Israel is going to be in the midst of a economic, political crisis beyond what it's already experiencing well before that.
Yeah. Larry, you wrote a piece on your website, sonar21.com, and it's the turning economic and political tide favors China and Russia, while spelling disaster for the West and Ukraine. What is the main point that you're trying to make in this article, and what is the main concern on your part?
Well, I think the efforts of the West to isolate and weaken China and Russia, using both economic power, political power, and to a lesser extent military power, have all backfired. It's failed. And China is the most prominent example of this right now. I drew up on an article that came out of Bloomberg a couple of weeks ago, and Bloomberg was citing how China's trade is shifting away from the United States. So the U.S. used to be a primary man. We got to export everything to the United States. That's where we're going to make our money. Well, now they're turning increasingly to Africa and other parts of Asia. But Africa in particular, Africa is a massive continent, 1.5, or I guess is 1.5 billion people scattered across that land. And on top of it, the Chinese are now making loans in Chinese currency to companies, businesses, individuals, also in part to finance a lot of the purchases from China. So China is really, it's well underway in creating an alternative to the U.S. controlled financial system, the Bretton Woods system, the IMF, World Bank, that has existed since the end of World War II. Something new is coming into order. And with that, you're seeing dramatic increases in the trade volumes between China and these various countries in Africa, especially South Africa is a case in point. So that's where the U.S. has relied in the past on its ability to pressure countries because we were the economic colossus. We controlled the dollar, and if you didn't do what we said, we'd cut you off from the dollar and you'd die. Well, now there are alternatives to the dollar, and BRICS and China together are They're forging a new relationship that's outside of the control of the U.S. And we haven't. People say, "Well, it hasn't happened in the last year." Well, just as a reminder, the setting up the Bretton Woods system took about 3 to 4 years after World War II. So, the fact that this has been effort's been well underway for 2 years, and I mean, in an earnest effort to build it up, I think they're making extraordinary progress.
What is the role of the British government, Larry, in Ukraine? Because we've learned in the news that Britain has officially taken command of Ukrainian troops.
Yeah.
And what is the main goal on their part at this stage of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine?
Let the Brits set the house on fire and burn the thing to the ground. I mean, really, it's that should have sent a loud. If that report is true, and I have no reason to doubt it, but it could be a complete fabrication. But if in fact the U.S. has dumped that off on the Brits, hey, you go do it. Maybe there's someone in the Trump team that actually believes the Brits might be able to do something on this front. But I think the more shrewd, intelligent individuals around Trump realize this is a way to actually bring this war to an end by forcing the Brits to have to shoulder the burden, which they can't carry. They can't do it. So we'll see.
Putting this and together with what's going on in Poland, they're talking about 2 drones going to the government building and trying to attack them. And these stories, 2 Belarusian guy they were captured. How it seems that they're trying to make some sort of chaos in what's going on in Ukraine. It's all about what is this story in Poland. It's not gonna. Russians are somehow so much conservative when it comes to Poland. They're not talking that much about it, and we don't hear that much from news. We don't learn from what has happened so far, and they're trying somehow escalating. What is going on in Poland together with that picture?
It's number one. It's a false flag. The drones that were likely sent into Poland were Russian drones that had been downed and recovered by Ukrainians, patched up, because on some of them you can see actually the duct tape holding them together, and had them fly into Poland under the pretext that, this is a Russian attack, even though they were reconnaissance drones. And even though the average drone may have cost like $10,000 or less, and the U.S. was using Sidewinder missiles, which I think are, several $100,000, if not more, to bring them down, and that and with all of the Western Patriot missiles are $7 million. With all the Western air defense that was rallied to deal with this, they still failed. They only shot down 3 drones out of 19 reportedly. Yeah. So this was just a ploy to try to create a pretext to bring in a wider European involvement in the war, except France and even Germany and the UK said, well, we don't think so. They can't figure out what they want to do. They're panicked because they can see the direction the war is headed. Ukraine's losing.
Does Donald Trump want an end to the conflict in Ukraine?
Probably, I think. But he doesn't want to be the one that brings it to an end because he's afraid he'll get blamed instead of getting the credit for bringing it to an end. So Vladimir Putin will bring it to an end militarily, and then Trump will say, well, what else were we going to do? We're not going to go to start a nuclear war with Russia, which is true.
The way that he's playing with European Union is does he want to put pressure on Russia? Does he want Is he honest, or he's trying to somehow manipulate the situation in Europe and convince them that putting an end to the conflict would be much better for their
Yeah,
economy?
if you judge him by his words, oh yeah, he's going to be really tough on Russia. But if you judge him by his actions and the preconditions he set out, they're not going to. I think they're going to let Russia run the table, win the war, and then they'll be in a position. The United States will really be in a position to negotiate then. So, it is. A lot of this is just political theater right now.
It's for what we've expected from the Trump administration before coming to power, and what's going on right now. It's still different.
Yeah, he can't figure out whether he wants to be in the boat rowing or out the side in the water swimming. This. What he should be doing is say, okay, we're out of this. We're stopping. We're going to end all support, and the war would come to an end. He's not doing that. He's doing it in a way that he's pinning it all upon Europe. That when Russia wins and prevails, he can turn to Europe and say, "Hey, this is your guys' fault. I told you what you needed to do, and you refused to listen to us."
Before wrapping up, Larry, what has happened? Considering IAEA, it seems that the United States is asking them. The U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright called for Iranian's nuclear program to be completely dismantled. And IAEA made an agreement with Iranians. In those agreements, what we've learned from the Iranian media, they didn't let IAEA to go to those sites that were bombed by the United States. And that's why they could, because the parliament in Iran was somehow so much angry about the agreement, but they tried to explain to the parliament that they're not allowed to go to those sites that were bombed. And you see the United States coming out and putting pressure. I would assume on IAEA, they want to dismantle. How realistic is that, Larry, to the way that they're pushing for the total, complete?
Yeah, I mean, that's what they say, but they're not in a position to do anything or pressure Iran to make that happen. Candidly, I don't know why the Iranians are even entertaining the IAEA. I think that's crazy. They should tell them to go to hell, or they should say, look, you want to come back in here for inspections? We'll be happy to open up for full inspections as long as you're doing the same in Israel. Do it in Israel, do it here. But until such time as long as Israel refuses to let you in to inspect, we're going to refuse to let you in to inspect. Very simple. I don't know why they haven't done that.
Yeah, good question. Thank you so much, Larry, for being with us today. Great pleasure, as always.
As I said at the outset, thank you for accommodating my schedule. I'm sorry to keep you up past your bedtime. Oh, you gotta go play with the kids. Make sure that they get the bed on.
They're waiting for me.
All right, my friend. We will talk Friday.
Yeah, exactly. See you soon. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.